Evgeny Morozov, visiting scholar at Stanford University and author of an interesting new book about the internet. You've been very critical of the US government's internet agenda. What would you do?
Well, my crucial suggestion in the book is to start thinking about these issues in terms of the internet. You actually have to forget everything you know about the internet and start looking at the domestic political context. You cannot have, that's what I argue in the book, you cannot have a unified internet freedom policy that will be comprehensive and that will work in Iran or China or Russia. In many cases, the decisions you make in Iran now, because of the internet, will have ramifications globally. Some people remember the famous outreach that the State Department made to Twitter last summer, when they basically, in the summer of 2009, where they basically asked Twitter to delay maintenance during the protests, which of course around the globe was interpreted as the US government's meddling with affairs of Twitter, and that made life worse for many internet users in places like China or Russia or elsewhere. Why did that happen? I argue that that happened because the people responsible for that decision were only thinking about these issues in terms of Twitter and the internet as opposed to the global political framework. And that happens when you get Silicon Valley types in government jobs where they need to think beyond the immediate venture capital / innovation agenda. It takes time to get to understand how decisions made in Iran get to influence the political situation in Moldova. So my proposal in this book is actually to start getting rid of the centralized structures which empower people who know everything about the internet but very little about China or Iran to make decisions which end up shaping global politics.
Can you give me an example of the Silicon Valley types who you say are shaping American policy?
Oh, plenty. You have Hillary Clinton, for example, now has...
She's not a Silicon Valley type.
She's not, but she has a senior advisor for innovation, a guy called Alec Ross, who comes from the world of telecom policy, who is very well acquainted with Eric Schmidt and others. He's a guy who has zero experience in foreign policy. I'll be very frank about it. And yet, he is very senior in terms of his position in the State Department. He ends up making a lot of political decisions which I argue are outside of his competence. Even though often those decisions are framed only as decisions about technology and the internet, because many of those people think that blogs are just tools, tweets are just tools, and that there is no politics involved. And I think this is a fundamental misreading of the situation. The ways in which the US government decides to shape its relationship with Google has a lot of impact on Google users in China or Iran. So to argue that Google just offers search and it's not political, wouldn't fly with me. So what I want is to make sure that people in the US government realize that technology is political, that many of the decisions which mask themselves as decisions about technology, actual decisions about politics and society and culture, and that we actually hold people responsible for bad decisions, of which there have been plenty.
So we also need to teach area specialists in government technology. Is that another goal?
Well, what I would do is actually start with empowering people on regional and local desks. So people who work on Iran policy should be knowledgeable about the internet and should decide how the internet fits the broader agenda, rather than to start from the other end and start to think how Iran fits the broader internet agenda. This is totally crazy, and we cannot have an internet freedom policy that places internet over any other regional interest, because that's just utopian. That's never going to happen. American interests in the Caucasus, it's concerns over energy supplies, are never going to give way to concerns about Azeri bloggers, bloggers from Armenia or Georgia. This is just going to be obvious. So, if you want to make a big speech where you say that we'll have an internet policy, and that policy will decide how we defend freedom of expression and everything else, I just say it's nonsense. It's not going to happen. There is no space in current American decision making for that idealism. And if you are making those commitments, you have to make sure that because some people in places like Azerbaijan will take those words seriously. They would actually think of America as a serious partner who will defend their freedoms and who will defend their, right to freedom of expression. And I just fear that that's not going to happen. And, all of those concerns will essentially be subsumed by broader concerns about security of the, or terrorism, or, energy supplies, and all this supposed concern about internet freedom is, it's just utopian, and it's not there.